That's why it's first. And we've been sitting on it for 3 centuries. And calling that sitting education. And it shows. So the first chakra is connected to the knee chakra, a sub-chakra, which is connected in the foot to a foot chakra. And this is why dancing then with your knees bent, as all indigenous people pray this way, they would never think of dashing from the lower chakra into the head and calling it prayer. So the indigenous people are close to this form of prayer. You pray by dancing with your knees bent. And that is very good work, because it reconnects us to the earth. And it's from there that we are going to receive our strength and our direction as healers and as celebrators. Now, of course, in talking about ritual, we also need to honor that dimension of the heart that is grieving. We will be doing some grief work tonight as well. And that is so important. Because when humans are in grief and do not have ways to deal with it, we get all blocked up in the heart and our creativity gets blocked up. And in my opinion, creativity is about the only thing our species has going for it. So we better do, at this time in history, with 11 years left to change our ways, we better do whatever inner work is needed to melt that rock of grief and anger that is in us. Remember, the first level of grief is anger. Whenever I see anger happening, especially among young people, my first question is, what are they grieving? What are we grieving? There is so much to grieve today with this ecological collapse and so much else happening. So we need rituals that allow a safe space wherein we can go into the grief. And we will do some of that tonight. Often when we do our rituals, people afterwards will say things like, well, I like the whole thing, but for me the most powerful thing was the grief work. They said, I grieve alone in my bedroom. And no one has ever asked me to grieve really in a group before. How much grief have North Americans done together, say, about slavery and racism? You see, racism is not going to be resolved by lawyers. Civil rights and legislation helps. It creates boundaries, but ultimately racism is in the heart. And if we can't grieve together this history, we will not melt the reality that racism is. And have we ever really done grief rituals around the genocide done indigenous people on this land? And every people have their grief work to do. Celtic people. How many people here have Celtic blood in them? Irish, Scotch, Welsh. Come on, hands up. Don't be so shy. Okay, look at that. 90% of the people. Celtic people have a lot of grief work to do. Celts were really the first third world country, if you will. The Irish had their forests ripped out to create the navy for the British Empire. And with the forest went the spirits of the forest and the land. And of course the language, etc. So if you look at your own roots and your own history, you'll find there's grief work to be done everywhere. So that's another part of the heart work involved in authentic ritual, is both the joy and the grief. I know at least 3 highways into the heart: joy, grief, and silence. Quakers and meditators know about the silence too. Silence is a direct road into the heart as well. So there will be opportunity for some of that tonight as well. A few weeks ago I was in England, and one of my talks I was talking to a group of Quakers about the technocosmic mass. And afterwards they said this to me. They said, George Fox didn't condemn ritual. What he said was this. He said, beware of form without power. Beware of form without power. And they said, that's why we've been sitting in silence for 4 centuries, in our ritual. Because we saw a lot of form, but not much power going on in the name of religious rituals. They said, after hearing about what you people are doing, maybe we Quakers can now move into more dancing mode instead of in a louder mode than just all the silence we've been drinking in for 4 centuries. Because, as you probably know, techno music has a very strong beat. It's what I call it the urban drum. The music you'll be hearing is like an urban drum, because it's an electronic drum. And it's not a drum of hides, but it is a drum, because it's about rhythm. It's about the first chakra work. But it's also a sweat lodge. We will be sweating by the time the night's over from our dance too. And remember, Onyemichi is an African drummer who heals with drumming. He comes from a tribe in Africa where he was instructed the traditional way of healing through drums. He's living now in California too. And he says that when you praise, hold nothing back. When you praise, hold nothing back. Praise is a giveaway. Praise is a generous emptying of yourself. Because when you can praise and empty yourself, hey, you're ready for something new. And that's what all authentic ritual is about. It's about transformation. It's about being made new and being made young again. And I hope that will happen. And I hope that the forms that we're developing and employing this evening will have power for you. We have found that they have had power for a lot of people. A lot of stories. Here's just a couple stories. A woman came to our techno mass 3 months ago, and she is a drug counselor for youth in San Francisco. So she brought 15 of her young people with her, 17 and 19-year-olds in drug rehab. And on the way back from the techno mass, they said to her in the van, they said, this is the first time in our lives that we've gotten high without drugs. Now, the need to get high is in our species. We have a right to get high. As Aquinas said, we are here to get drunk on the universe. But that we haven't had the forms of late. Because the ways in which we've been taught to worship, that is, sitting in benches, looking at the back of each other's necks and being read to, these ways don't work anymore. They are modern ways. They are based on the very form of what the printing press is, which launched the modern era in the 15th century. And that era is gone now. This is why so few young people are at most worship services in the West. Because the language doesn't work. And this is why they've gone out to develop their own, such as rave. And by connecting generations, linking up young and old together, I think we can draw the best of both and get some real energy flowing again, some real community flowing again. We did a techno mass in San Francisco at a Body Soul conference a couple years ago, and 1,200 people there, and the theme was angels. So we had 500 pictures of angels from all the world traditions, because all traditions celebrate spirits and angels. So there we were dancing in that context. It was a beautiful night. And afterwards I ran into 3 young men, 2 white guys and a black guy. They're 20 years old. And they had attended, and they said, you know, we're not part of the conference. We snuck in. We work in the hotel. But we heard there was a rave mass, and we had to see this. Because we go to raves every weekend. We've been doing it for 5 years, since we were 15 years old. And I said, well, how was it for you? They said, well, we've been looking for in raves, we found here tonight. What we're looking for, they said, is deep prayer. And we loved it, and we loved praying with people of other generations. In a rave, it tends to be one generation. And they said, you know, we wanna keep doing this. We did a rave dance, and I explained the ritual and so forth. And afterwards, a woman came up, very sophisticated woman, about 42, and she said, she had tears coming down her cheeks. And she said, I have an 11-year-old boy. She said, I'm a practicing Christian, I'm Episcopalian, and I love my faith. But she said, my boy can't stand church. If I take him even close to church, his whole body starts quivering. I can't even get him in. And she said, this is very painful to me. It's been going on for 2.5 years. But she said, in the middle of this dance, these tears started coming down my cheeks, and I heard a voice that said to me, here is a language in which I can pray with my son. And that is the issue. I don't care if people are comfortable in their pews or not. Jesus never said, blessed are the comfortable. At least I haven't found it. And neither did Buddha. Neither did Buddha. Let go of the comfort. The issue is this. In what language will the next generations be praying? That's the issue. And we who are adults at this stage, we are a bridge, a transition generation. It is our task to bring the best of the stories of the past, but into a language that is useful and therefore healing, truly healing and community building for the next generation. So that's really something of what we're about tonight. There is a saying in the rave community. It's a good saying. It goes like this: shut up and dance. So I want to abide by that saying. I want to shut up. I think I've been going about 45 minutes or so, and to get us ready to dance. So what I'm going to invite you to do is this. We're going to invite you to leave the room until you're called back. It'll be about 12 to 15 minutes, so you have a break and all. But when you come in, please, the room will be, there will be some chairs around the edge for those who get tired or find it difficult to dance. But for the most part, the space will be open. So when you come in, you'll want to bring your purses and things and put them around the edges, of course. Leave the space open for dancing. And know that in this kind of dance, there is no one way to dance. You're just responding to the music and the pictures that will be telling you stories. And we will give you a brief outline of what we're doing so everyone's at home with it. And I want to make clear this is a technocosmic ritual, not a technocosmic mass. So it's not a particular liturgical tradition at all. It's a very generic ritual that we're all sharing here. But I do ask when you come in to come in reverently, to come in silence, to meditate on the pictures or the sayings that you see around the frame, and together we will create a sacred space here. And hopefully this vessel that we create will be a gathering of the wonderful momentum and lessons and people and visitors and ideas that have already arisen at this conference, and it will be also a trumpet that sends you on your way tomorrow back to work, back to your communities, back to your homes, to be an agent of transformation. To be an agent of transformation. In other words, a warrior. The last dance we do, there will be two major dances, and the first will be a praise dance. The one at the end will be what I call the spiritual warrior dance. Because your heart not only has to be big, it has to be strong to develop the leadership that is needed if our species is going to come to its better self in these next 11 years. Okay? So, thank you very much. We'll see you in about 15 minutes. Creativity is about the only thing our species has going for it. So we better do, at this time in history, with 11 years left to change our ways, we better do whatever inner work is needed to melt that rock of grief and anger that is in us. Remember, the first level of grief is anger. Whenever I see anger happening, that's why it's first. And we've been sitting on it for 3 centuries. And calling that sitting education. And it shows. So the first chakra is connected to the knee chakra, a sub-chakra, which is connected in the foot to a foot chakra. And this is why dancing then with your knees bent, as all indigenous people pray this way, they would never think of this. Now, of course, in talking about ritual, we also need to honor that dimension of the heart that is grieving. We will be doing some grief work tonight as well. And that is so important. Because when humans are in grief and do not have ways to deal with it, we get all blocked up in the heart and our creativity gets blocked up. And in my opinion, especially among young people, my first question is, what are they grieving? What are we grieving? There is so much to grieve today with this ecological collapse and so much else happening. So we need rituals that allow a safe space wherein we can go into the grief. And we will do some of that tonight. Often when we do our rituals, people afterwards will say things like, well, I like the whole thing, but for me the most powerful thing was the grief work. They said, I grieve alone in my bedroom, dashing from the lower chakra into the head and calling it prayer. So the indigenous people are close to this form of prayer. You pray by dancing with your knees bent. And that is very good work, because it reconnects us to the earth. And it's from there that we are going to receive our strength and our direction as healers and as celebrators.